From the Diary of Anne Frank NCERT Class 10, First Flight, Chapter 4. Taken from the novel The Diary of a Young Girl, the story of Anneliese Marie Anne Frank. Anneliese Marie Anne Frank was a German-born Jewish girl who wrote while in hiding with her family and 4 friends in Amsterdam during the German occupation of the Netherlands in the World War II. Hello, I'm Anne Frank. This is a photo as I would wish myself to look all the time. Then I would maybe have a chance to come to Hollywood. Anne Frank, 10th October 1942. Before you read. Her family had moved to Amsterdam after the Nazis gained power in Germany, but were trapped when the Nazi occupation extended into the Netherlands. As persecutions against the Jewish population increased, the family went into hiding in July 1942 in hidden rooms in her father Otto Frank's office building. After 2 years in hiding, the group was betrayed and transported to the concentration camp system where Anne died of typhus in Bergen-Belsen within days of her sister Margot Frank. Her father Otto, the only survivor of the group, returned to Amsterdam after the war ended to find that her diary had been saved. Convinced that it was a unique record, he took action to have it published in English under the name of The Diary of a Young Girl. Before you read, the diary was given to Anne Frank for her 13th birthday and chronicles the event of her life from 12 June 1942 until its final entry of 1st August 1944. It was eventually translated from its original Dutch into many languages and became one of the world's most widely read books. There have also been several films, television, and theatrical productions, and even an opera based on the diary. Described as a work of a mature and insightful mind, the diary provides an intimate examination of daily life under Nazi occupation. Anne Frank has become one of the most renowned and discussed of the Holocaust victims. Do you keep a diary? A diary, a journal, a log, or a memoir are some terms we use to describe a written record of personal experience. Let us try to understand them first. Terms used to describe personal experience. Diary. A book with a separate space or page for each day in which you write down your thoughts and feelings or what has happened on that day. Journal, patrika, a full record of a journey, a period of time, or an event written every day. Log, yatra dainiki, a written record of events with times and dates, usually official. Memoir, samsmaran vritant, a record of person's own life and experience, usually a famous person. Anne Frank's family members: Anne's father, Otto Frank; Anne's mother, Edith Frank; Anne's sister, Margot Frank. Excerpts from the diary. Writing in a diary is a really strange experience for someone like me. Not only because I have never written anything before, but also because it seems to me that later on neither I nor anyone else will be interested in the musings of a 13-year-old schoolgirl. Oh well, it doesn't matter. I feel like writing, and I have an even greater need to get all kinds of things off my chest. Paper has more patience than people. I thought of the saying on one of those days when I was feeling a little depressed and was sitting at home with my chin in my hands, bored and listless, wondering whether to stay in or go out. I finally stayed where I was, brooding. Yes, paper does have more patience, and since I'm not planning to let anyone else read this stiff-backed notebook grandly referred to as a diary unless I should ever find a real friend, it probably won't make a bit of difference. Now I'm back to the point that prompted me to keep a diary in the first place. I don't have a friend. Let me put it more clearly. Since no one will believe that a 13-year-old girl is completely alone in the world, and I'm not. I having lovely parents and a 16-year-old sister, and there are about 30 people I can call friends. I have a family, loving aunts, and a good home. No, on the surface, I seem to have everything except my one true friend. All I think about when I'm with friends is having a good time. I can't bring myself to talk about anything but ordinary everyday things. We don't seem to be able to get any closer, and that's the problem. Maybe it's my fault that we don't confide in each other. In any case, that's just how things are, and unfortunately, they're not liable to change. This is why I've started the diary. To enhance the image of this long-awaited friend in my imagination, I don't want to jot down the facts in this diary the way most people would do. But I want the diary to be my friend. And I'm going to call this friend Kitty. Since no one would understand a word of my stories to Kitty, if I were to plunge right in, I'd better provide a brief sketch of my life, much as I dislike doing so. Oral comprehension check 1. What makes writing in a diary a strange experience for Anne Frank? Writing in a diary was a strange experience for Anne Frank as she never had a diary, and it was a gift on her 13th birthday. She considered it her best friend, on which she relied the most and with whom she shared all her ups and downs, has more patience than people. Why does Anne want to keep a diary? Anne always feels lonely and distressed, so to get off all the burden and pain, she wants to keep a diary in which she finds a true friend, as she has hardly any friends whom she could confide in. Why did Anne think she could confide more in her diary than in people? Anne felt that paper had more patience than people to listen to her plight. So, it was easier for her to write all kind of thoughts which she had in her mind. Her personal diary was not meant for anyone else to read. My father, the most adorable father I have ever seen, didn't marry my mother until he was 36 and she was 25. My sister Margot was born in Frankfurt in Germany in 1926. I was born on 12 June 1929. I lived in Frankfurt until I was 4. My father emigrated to Holland in 1933. My mother, Edith Hollander Frank, went with him to Holland in September, while Margaret and I were sent to Aachen to stay with our grandmother. Margot went to Holland in December and I followed in February when I was plunked down on the table as a birthday present for Margot. I started right away at the Montessori nursery school. I stayed there until I was 6, at which time I started in the first form. In the 6th form, my teacher was Mrs. Kupris, the headmistress. At the end of the year, we were both in tears as we said a heartbreaking farewell. In the summer of 1941, Grandma fell ill and had to have an operation, so my birthday passed with little celebration. Grandma died in January 1942. No one knows how often I think of her and still love her. This birthday celebration in 1942 was intended to make up for the other, and Grandma's candle was lit along with the rest. The four of us are still doing well, and that brings me to the present date of 20th June 1942 and the solemn dedication of my diary. Comprehension Check 2. Why does Anne provide a brief sketch of her life? By providing the brief sketch of her life, Anne wants to give an overview of her family, relatives, and her age. This helps the reader to develop a connection with the author. What tells you that Anne loved her grandmother? Anne wrote in her diary about her grandmother that no one knows how often I think of her and still love her. On her 13th birthday, she also lighted up a candle for her grandmother. This shows that Anne loved her grandmother. Saturday, 20th June 1942. Anne writes in her diary, Dearest Kitty, our entire class is quacking in its boots. The reason, of course, is the forthcoming meeting in which the teachers decide who will move up to the next form and who will be kept back. Half the class is making bets. Gian and I laugh ourselves silly at the two boys behind us, Cian and Jacques, who have staked their entire holiday savings on their bet. From morning to night, it's, you're going to pass. No, I'm not. Yes, you are. No, I'm not. Even G's pleading glances and my angry outbursts can't calm them down. If you ask me, there are so many dummies that about a quarter of the class should be kept back. But teachers are the most unpredictable creatures on the earth. I'm not so worried about my girlfriends and myself. We'll make it. The only subject I'm not sure about is maths. Anyway, all we can do is wait. Until then, we keep telling each other not to lose heart. I get along pretty well with all my teachers. There are 9 of them, 7 men and 2 women. Mr. Keesing, the old fogey who teaches maths, was annoyed with me for ages because I talked so much. After several warnings, he assigned me extra homework, an essay on the subject. What can you write about that? I'd worry about that later, I decided. I jotted down the title in my notebook, tucked it in my bag, and tried to keep quiet. That evening, after I'd finished the rest of my homework, the note about the essay caught my eye. I began thinking about the subject while chewing the tip of my fountain pen. Anyone could ramble on and leave big spaces between the words, but the trick was to come up with convincing arguments to prove the necessity of talking. I thought and suddenly I had an idea. I wrote 3 pages Mr. Keesing had assigned me and was satisfied. I argued that talking is a student's trait and that I would do my best to keep it under control, but that I would never be able to cure myself of the habit, since my mother talked as much as I did not, if not more, and that there's not much you can do about inherited traits. Mr. Keesing had a good laugh at my arguments, but when I proceeded to talk my way through the next lesson, he assigned me a second essay. This time it was supposed to be on an incorrigible chatterbox. I handed it in and Mr. Keesing had nothing to complain about for 2 whole lessons. However, during the 3rd lesson, he'd finally had enough. Anne Frank, as punishment for talking in class, write an essay entitled Quack, 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 said Mistress Chatterbox. The class roared. I had to laugh too, though I had nearly exhausted my ingenuity on the topic of chatterboxes. It was time to come up with something else, something original. My friend Sam, who is good at poetry, offered to help me write the essay from the beginning to end in verse, and I jumped for joy. Mr. Keesing was trying to play a joke on me with this ridiculous subject, but I'd make sure the joke was on him. I finished my poem and it was beautiful. It was about a mother duck and a father swan with 3 baby ducklings who were bitten to death by the father because they quacked too much. Luckily, Mr. Keesing took the joke right away. He read the poem to the class, adding his own comments and to several other classes as well. Since then, I have been allowed to talk and haven't been assigned any extra homework. On the contrary, Mr. Keesing's always making jokes these days. Yours, Anne. Comprehension Check 3. Why was Mr. Keesing annoyed with Anne? What did he ask her to do? Keesing was Anne's maths teacher. He was annoyed with Anne because she was a very talkative girl and talked too much in his class. He assigned her extra homework, asking her to write an essay on the subject, a chatterbox. How did Anne justify her being a chatterbox in her essay? Anne gave 2 arguments to justify her being a chatterbox in the essay. One, that chatting is a student's hobby, and other reason that nothing can be done about the inherited traits. She carried these genes from her mother as she was also very talkative. Do you think Mr. Keesing was a strict teacher? Now there can be 2 probable answers to this question. It can't be said that Mr. Keesing was a strict teacher. Nowhere he was found reprimanding Anne. He wanted discipline in class. He was a fun-loving person too. Or, yes, Mr. Keesing was a strict teacher. He did not allow students to talk in his class as he wanted them to concentrate on their studies. He often punished Anne for little things. What made Mr. Keesing allow Anne to talk in class? Through her brilliant poem, Anne made it obvious to Mr. Keesing that she had understood his trick of playing joke on her, and it would do no good but make her disinterested in his class. Hence, he allowed her to talk in class. Thanks. Any questions? You can find me at sharmashwets@gmail.com.